Hi, this is Quinlan. I'm here on the southeastern coast of Iwate today in Rikuzentakata. I came here to visit the Iwate Tsunami Memorial Museum, which is here in this city, as it was greatly devastated when a 15-meter tsunami struck it 10 years ago. I'm standing here on the seawall in Rikuzentakata, and behind me here are all these tiny pine trees that are replanted based on this huge 2-kilometer long area that once had a whole little grove of pine trees that were all washed away by the tsunami on March 11th, 2011. I'm here to see something that often gets called the Miraculous lone pine tree, as it somehow survived the tsunami, despite the hundreds or thousands rather that were knocked down. However, the saltwater inundation did kill it 2 months later, so it miraculously didn't get knocked over, but it did die in May of that year. And so the one that we'll go see here in a minute is actually now a replica that they made a year or so, a couple of years after. And the seawall that I'm standing on right here, it's 12.5 meters high, whereas the past one was just 5 meters high. However, the 2011 tsunami was 15 meters here at this point, and so even with this new one, it would only slow down the tsunami. But that's all it has to do, is slow it down, because they haven't rebuilt houses in the central area of town that was most destroyed. They've only been allowed to rebuild their homes on higher areas, and so there's only businesses down here, and all they need is to get a little bit of extra time so that they can escape to high ground, which is what the function of this is, were there to be another tsunami of equal ferocity. And behind me, you can see the miraculous solitary pine tree, the Ippon Matsu. We're now approaching 10 years since the great East Japan earthquake and tsunami of March 11th, 2011. I wanted to take this opportunity on the 10th anniversary of the great East Japan earthquake and tsunami to talk about my own experiences here during that time. I was inland, and so I don't really feel like I have the right to talk about it, as I wasn't out on the coast. I didn't experience the tsunami, just the earthquake itself. But I still have some story to tell, and I wanted to share what it was like, at least, living in the mountains of central Iwate during that great East Japan earthquake and tsunami. But for now, let's get out of the wind. But you can hardly hear me in this. All right, it's not quite as windy over here. Everywhere on the coast here is full of stories and history relating to not only this most recent tsunami in 2011, but also the ones that have continuously struck more than once every 100 years on this Sanriku coast throughout time immemorial, basically. And this particular area right here is called the Sakura line. As you may or may not know, sakura is cherry blossom in Japanese, or cherry tree. And these trees you can see up here, some of them have the little pink ribbons on them, are the line where the tsunami wave stopped. These are actually taranome right here, which I love to eat in the spring, and I made videos about picking taranome. There is actually a nonprofit organization, which I'll link to in the description, that is trying to plant an even larger sakura line. They started up 10 years ago, and they're trying to plant, I believe, 17,000 cherry trees in a line marking the far boundary of where the tsunami struck, to create a visual, both memorial and perhaps reference for people when they're running in the inevitable next tsunami that will come sooner or later, so they'll know where they're most likely going to be safe. I saw a local woman get out of her car right around here, and so I asked her about this location because I wanted to confirm that I was in the right place. And she was really friendly and told me a lot about it here, and even mentioned that a relative of hers owns that house with the red roof right behind me, and that I should go ask him, and he knows a lot of interesting stories. Let's go check it out. So I just spent the last 45 minutes talking with the local family here, and wow. Yeah, I'll take off my mask now, but people are so friendly here. It never ceases to surprise and amaze me how friendly people are. I come just knowing only his name from a relative, and I get invited in, they offer me tea. They tried to feed me a meal, but I just ate, so I didn't want to take too much of their time, so I politely declined a meal. But people are so friendly. And then he explained how during the tsunami that the whole neighborhood came and gathered here because of, it was literally, the waves went just up to the borderline of the house here. But the house itself wasn't flooded, and so as a result, this was a sort of default evacuation shelter, and everybody came and gathered here. And he also then proudly showed me his award for agriculture, how his son went to a great university in Tokyo, and he has a grandson. He showed me his whole family. People are so friendly. He's 83 years old, the gentleman, and then the people who are with him. And what a kind soul. I may visit him again. Now this tree right here, he was saying, "Hi? So desu. Yoku wakarimashita ne." Domo. So this tree, he was saying, had 2 meters of water up at the base. Did you see that? He just came out of the door and asked me if I was a YouTuber, because he was trying to figure out what I was getting information for, why I was talking. And I said it was about the internet and not exactly a newspaper, and just that I was sharing information with the outside world. And he figured out YouTuber. Modern guy. Now there's another place I want to take you, which is called the Goishi Coast. Let's check it out. It's a really windy day. It's been hard to find a place where I can talk to you guys without the wind making it impossible to hear what I'm saying. I came here today to refresh my memory of what it was like 10 years ago, and to both explain a little bit of what happened on the coast, though I'm sure everyone is very familiar with that, as well as to share my own little story from experiencing it inland in Iwate Prefecture, which, of course, we didn't experience the tsunami at all. There was nearly 100 kilometers and an entire mountain range between us and the ocean. So I've always felt like I don't really have a right to talk about the events of March 11th, 2011, because though I was here and experienced it, my experience of it was really not far above prolonged extreme inconvenience. There was no danger that I personally experienced, and so I feel odd talking about it myself when I know so many people and have met over the years so many people who either saw it with their own eyes and or lost loved ones and witnessed things which they will never forget. So I came here today with that in mind, but I ended up talking with a lot of locals. I didn't come here on an interview mission, but I ended up speaking with 3 different local people, all of whom were extremely warm and friendly, and while shy, they didn't want me to put them on camera, they were really forthcoming about their experience and what they had seen and done at that time and over the last 10 years. And what struck me most about their stories was how positive they all were. In the first case, I spoke with a woman in her mid-20s who was in high school at the time of the tsunami. She was working as an English guide at the Iwate Tsunami Memorial Museum, which I recommend you go to. It's free, it's fantastic. There's English guides there. It's not only English guides, but the signage is all in English, and you can see videos that explain with English subtitles everything that happened there. It's a fantastic facility, and it's free. There's really no reason not to go there. I 100% recommend it if you're anywhere in the neighborhood of Rikuzentakata to check out that memorial museum. It's amazing. But I mention it because a woman working there experienced it in high school, and she lost some of her classmates and knew many people who died. Her house was destroyed, and they got government money to rebuild their house on a higher area on the mountainside of town. So she was not unscathed, though her immediate family was fine. And yet she said, in her personal experience, it was a net positive for her, and that she chose to see it in a positive light. She thought about the opportunities she got to study English, to travel abroad, and to meet lots of different people who came that she might not have met had it not happened. And I think that if you're someone who experiences this sort of tragedy, you could just focus on the negative, or you could feel like maybe you don't have a right to take it positively because of how many people lost their lives. And yet, I think that perhaps it's even better, it's even more respectful to those who lost their lives if you do take it positively, do change it into something that you grew from in your life, and take even the worst experiences and, yeah, look at them not as dark, terrible things completely, but at least in being able to see them as something that you gained from as well, and that could have been a positive influence on who you are now. March 11th, 2011. The Great East Japan earthquake and tsunami, of course, had its epicenter off the coast of Fukushima, but rocked all of eastern Japan. And where I was, it happened at 2:46 in the afternoon on a Friday. I was driving my car, and at the time I was living in Hanamaki, which is a small town to the south of Morioka. And I actually lived out in the countryside for a couple of years, and this was then. And so I was driving in the between rice fields when suddenly I felt my steering wheel being pulled off to the left, off to the side of the road. And at first I thought something was wrong with my engine. And so I pulled the car over, and then I realized that the car was leaping back and forth, and I could see all the power lines going back and forth, back and forth. The car, I was almost afraid the car was going to tip over. It was leaping so violently where I was on the road. And so I opened the door and sort of leaped out into one of the dry, snowy rice fields, because this was March. There was still a lot of snow on the ground, especially out in the mountains where I was. So I waited and waited and waited. It was a 5-minute earthquake. I believe it was like 5.5 minutes, something like that. It was a really long earthquake. And I was afraid some of the power lines were going to go down, but they did not. But the power itself, of course, did go off. So I drove home, found that my house, inside of my house was trashed, like a printer, lost a printer was broken, and of course all bookshelves, several shelves, lots of broken glass everywhere. It was a mess inside the house, but the structure was fine. What happened afterwards is what sticks out more in my memory. We had a power outage then until about Monday around noon where I was living. We did have water though, which was fantastic, but it was ice cold and it snowed a lot. I remember it snowed the day after. I remember walking down the street in the countryside trying to walk to the nearest grocery store to see if I could find any food, because the supermarkets were closed. They were just emptied out immediately, and there was no food to be found. There was no electricity for that first 3 days. I had a battery-powered radio, and that's how I even found out what was going on. I had cell phone coverage for about 8 hours after the tsunami struck, and I guess that was because the cell phone towers were battery powered. And so I was able to get on my phone, use Skype, call my parents, and tell them that I was okay. And with the tower down, I lost all communication with the outside world until we got electricity back on Monday. So it was only 3 days. But what lasted longer was the supermarkets were empty. You couldn't get gas. You had to wait about 12 hours in a line, like literally, like you'd have to camp out overnight to get gas the next morning. And then they were rationing it to just 10 liters per car. And that lasted like 2 weeks or so, I want to say. And in the following weeks, I went out to the coast a few times with different volunteer groups to do volunteer work. A lot of it at first was delivering goods, but then after that, it was mostly just shoveling the muck out of ruined buildings and trying to clean them up and get them so that they could be taken down. And so it was a lot of just pulling broken glass and broken wires, and we destroyed, you had to knock down a few houses down to the actual bare timber, so we were knocking out all the drywall. There were a lot of people who spent entire months just living and volunteering out there. A lot of people moved up to Iwate as part of volunteer groups and have settled here. I was living inland, and so I just went up a handful of days to volunteer, but I did get out to see Kamaishi about 7 days after the tsunami, when it was still mountains of wreckage. And yeah, it was really horrifying. You know, it was really sad to see. Now you wouldn't know from looking at it. The city is completely rebuilt. Everything, except for all the empty lots, it looks rather nice. Tsunami have been striking this area since people have lived here, since before then probably, of course. And the people here have internalized a lot of the wisdom from that. And the fact that only 20,000 people, roughly, died in Japan as a result of this is a testament to just how well people worked to save each other's lives as well as themselves. And it could have been a lot worse. It really could have. Despite how horrifying it was, it's good to see how resilient everyone is and how positive and happy and smiling a lot of the people that you see out on the coast are today, and how warmly they will welcome you into their homes and be happy to tell you their stories. Or more likely, they just want to talk to you. They're curious about foreigners, just like a lot of other people in rural Japan. So when I went into the old man's house today, sure, I asked him about the time, but he was more interested in talking to me about Wisconsin, and he was curious about, oh, it's near Canada, and he remembered some English from his junior high school. And this is an 83-year-old man, and he remembered some English that apparently he studied in junior high school, 70 years ago? And he wanted to practice his English on me, and he was trying to offer me food. So people are here just so warm and friendly. It reminds me again and again why I love living in rural Japan. Of course, I live in the city, but drive half an hour in any direction and I'm in rural Japan. And yeah, people are wonderful. The sun is starting to go down here, but I would really like to invite you to come and see the Rikuzentakata Iwate Tsunami Memorial here. It's free and there's English guidance, and it really does share what happened then quite effectively. It really is a powerful facility, and I hope that you get a chance to come and experience it. I could ramble on forever about those days and weeks following the tsunami and what it was like, but the sun is going down and I got to drive home. It's about 2 hours back to Morioka from here. So thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you on the trails.